everyone would please stand.
Thus pray. Our Heavenly Father, we come to you tonight, Lord. Thank you for another honor to be here to serve the city, Lord. Help each one of us to make the right choice and do the right thing, Father. And Lord, touch all the sick and afflicted, Lord. Touch our men and ladies on the battlefield, our Lord. Put your arms around them. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Our faith is flag.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Janet, if we can have the roll call, please.
Mayor Lambert,
Here.
Vice Mayor Rabbit,
Here.
Councilmember Councilmember Meehan,
Here.
Councilmember Sewell,
Here.
Interim City Manager Williams,
Here.
City Attorney
No,
All that down there, on that end. All sorts of
gravelly voices and all the rest.
Maybe one I say about say it to give the things from sound different.
Yeah, I hope I wasn't the giver on all that. Again, thank you all for being here tonight, and thank you, Mark, for driving in to be with us to run through a little presentation that you have put together on the Board of Regent. And without further ado, we'll go ahead and turn it over to you. I trust that we have everything we need to. Do we have the ability to show the PowerPoint?
No, we do not.
We do not. Okay. All right. We have printouts of the presentation. Yes. Mark, yeah, exactly. Instead of you having to stand the whole time, if you would like to fill up here and have a seat.
Are you sure? Yeah.
Please do.
That way you won't, if you roll off in, I can grab you before you get to the floor.
Okay. Hey, Mark, I think I get from Nashville to East Ridge without, in less than 3 hours. I thought I had plenty of time.
You can just count on 3 hours.
That's what I gave it. It took me 3:45 now.
No, okay.
It was awful. So I know why I live in Knoxville now, I think so.
Well, it's always good to have you with us.
Thank you. I'm really happy to be here. Can't believe this was the highlight of my day. I was looking forward to seeing you guys. And I don't know how much detail you really wanted, but I thought maybe it would be helpful to revisit sort of how we got here. If that's not helpful, you just give me the hook and we'll move on.
I think that would be great. I think that would
So
be
just as a reminder how we got here, it all started in 2011, and I've now had at least 5 people tell me they were primarily responsible for drafting the Board of Regent law. So I'm not sure really who was primarily responsible, but there's certainly a lot of folks who had a hand in drafting it. And thank you again.
I thought it was you.
Yeah, I helped, but I helped indirectly. And the way I helped indirectly is this law is largely modeled after a law that I wrote in 1998, which is called the Tourism Development Zone Law, that basically allowed people that were building convention centers, as Chattanooga has done, to capture the sales tax increment in their downtown areas that resulted from growing, from building a convention center. And there's about 8 or 9 of these TDZs, as they're called, all over the state. And I wrote that law for Knoxville way back in '98. And so this is sort of a derivation of that law. But if you ask the guys at Kingsport, they wrote it. If you guys at Rise in Bristol, they wrote it. And so it's kind of funny. And I know that y'all had a hand down here at East Ridge. But it was, and obviously the purpose of it, has a lot of flowery language, but basically it was to help us compete with our neighboring states whose sales tax rates are a whole lot lower than ours. And so if you're a retailer and you're looking at a place to settle that's charging a 4% rate and we're charging 9.25%, where are you going to go? You're going to go right across the state line where people are going to pay 5% less for their groceries every day. So this is a way that was to combat it. There are now 3 of these regions, Bristol, Kingsport, and East Ridge. Kingsport has anything but dirt. Bristol has a huge shopping center called the Pinnacle with a Bass Pro in it, and you guys are next in line to get things moving. And I think some of y'all have been up to the one in Bristol. So so right after this was this law came in 2011. Candidly, this something that the governor and his administration never liked at all. And they shut it down almost immediately. They asked for legislation to go through. This prior to our representative here. I'm sure he would have stopped it. No, I'm kidding. But he probably was actually good for East Ridge if it was stopped, because it sort of limited anybody else that could do it. So if you do not have your application in by January 1st, 2012, you're too late. And so basically they shut this law down. You've got a 12-year period. They also changed it because they realized that basically any cost for 30 years could be reimbursed. And they said, whoa, that's a big mistake. And they said, we're going to limit that to a 10-year period from when you get certified and 2 years back. So, we were certified in 2012, so you basically go back to a period in 2010 and then essentially up to 2022. So if we don't incur eligible costs during that period, enough eligible costs, then after that we can't reimburse ourselves, nor can we reimburse developers like Johnson there for their costs after that date. So that's a really important date that we focus on, that 10-year period, because guys, we're already 3 years in. We got only 7 years left basically to incur eligible costs to do this. And so this is not, it's 30 years of payments, but not 30 years of doing development, excuse me. So how does this thing work? Basically, up on my slides is how the Board Region District works, obviously. So you basically have the state apportioning certain sales tax revenues and use tax revenues, but use taxes are inconsequential. So they basically are apportioning to the city a share of the state sales tax revenue, not our local option. That's really important to recognize, is that unlike some other laws, it does not touch the local option part of the taxes. So our part of local option on sales collected in East Ridge is not affected by this law. It goes the way it normally goes. This just affects the state's sales taxes, not our local option taxes. So it's only the base 7% state taxes, not the difference between the 7% and the local sales tax rate. Okay? So we're talking just about the 7%, and then it gets cut down a little bit. We'll talk about that in a minute. And then, as I mentioned, you got a 30-year allocation period. So to reimburse ourselves for expenditures that we can, the costs that John and his team have incurred, the costs that we incur as the city. We'll talk a little bit about eligible costs, but as I mentioned, we only have 30 years. I mean, that's a long time. And the 10-year number that I mentioned before is the more important number right now, but this does not go on for eternity. We basically have a 30-year period to do this. And we must use those things to pay eligible costs under the law. And what I'm trying to make an important point there is we can't just put this in our general fund budget. This is not, these monies have to be used to pay back what the law allows, not just to say, okay, we got $300,000 this year, we can just put it in our general fund. We have to use it to pay ourselves back. And so every year we got to come up with a list of our eligible costs, give them to the state, and build up these costs so that we can reimburse ourselves for them. So it's really important that we do that. And we are doing that. We did it 3 months ago, and we're going to be doing it, we did it a year and a half ago after each fiscal year, and we need to really be very careful. We've taken a very liberal view in what's eligible because the law is so broadly written. We've claimed everything we think we can. And I'm sure that they may push back at some point a little bit on some of the things we're claiming, but given some of the expenditures we've been incurring lately, as I understand it, certainly relating to moving the fire station, building the road, we're incurring a lot of eligible costs in the Board Region District, in addition to the costs that John and his team are incurring that are going to be eligible reimbursable costs. So going to the next page, what are the state sales taxes that are allocated? As I mentioned, you got 7% is our state sales tax. Right off the top, you take off 1%, that was the special increase in 2002. All these bills, these special sales tax bills, the TDZs and everything, they said, we ain't giving you that 1%. You don't get it. So we're down to 6% right there. Then there's the 0.5% for education, BEP, as they like to call it, from sometime in the 90s. They say, you don't get to touch that. So you're down to 5.5% before you even get started from the 7%. Okay, so we don't get the whole 7, and we don't even get the whole 5.5. We only get part of that, but you start the calculation at 5.5%. And then we get to increase over what the base taxes were in the district. And so, and we'll talk about specific numbers, but basically, they calculated what our sales tax revenues were in our district as of the fiscal year ending June 30th, 2012, and those are our base taxes that we know we've got to exceed every year to get our money, basically, okay? And so, and then of that amount, we only get 75% of the increase. And so mathematically, with that, if you take 75% and multiply it by 0.5%, and you often hear this, I'm sure John and I have talked about it, and people in Bristol talk about it all the time, you basically get 4.125% of the rate. Not 4.15, that's the rate, effective rate that's being distributed to the city. So if you got a $100 sale, $4.12 or 13 cents, basically, if you round up, will be allocated to the city of East Ridge through the Florida region for every sale in excess of the base taxes, okay? So, I mean, that's real money. But it's not the whole banana. It's part of it. So, the state is supposed to give us our money every year within 90 days of their fiscal year end. So their fiscal year ends June 30th, so every September 30th, they're supposed to write us a check. Of course, we've had all kind of startup issues, arguing with them over the base, arguing with them over what's in the district this year and last year. It slowed them way down last year. This year, they're done better. We think we're going to have our check anytime soon if we haven't already received it. Anybody here know whether we got our check yet?
We have not yet.
Okay, yep.
I'm anxiously anticipating it.
Yes, I hope I can check the mail every day really quickly. So as I mentioned, every year to get that check, we have to certify our costs and submit the cost that we've agreed to reimburse John for. And so there's basically two lists that we give them, the city list and the developer list. And if we agree to reimburse any other developers like John, we'll have to submit their list as well as of eligible costs. But right now, our only incentive agreement is with Exit One LLC. And so they come up with a list each year, and Kimberly, they've got a huge list. They gave us what we needed to get over the threshold this year, but they've obviously, given that they've started work on the project, their number is only going to go up very dramatically, as is ours, as we're paying for some public improvement costs related to that. So that's the general law. As to our own district, as we talked about, it was certified by the state back in 2012. But what I learned, candidly, really this year is, when it was certified, it's a beautiful little green map, and it says 949 acres on it, but there's no dimensions. If you guys are surveyors or anything, there's no meets and bounds. There's nothing. You can't tell okay, it goes 100 feet off the road. I think John again could certainly add some color to this because he was involved a little bit, and I was not. But we couldn't say, oh, the line goes right in front of that cash register and stuff because we just didn't know. And so we found that was a big part of the challenge this year. Was I think the state for the first time realized that our map didn't follow partial lines. In other words, you couldn't go to the GIS system and match it up with the GIS system. And they say, wait a minute here, we don't know what parcels are in this district. And moreover, when they measured it, they felt it was way bigger than what was allowed. And so that created us a lot of problems for us this year. So then along comes, and I think the reason I'm going through this is I know there's been some questions about what the developer's incentive is supposed to be. So back on June 5th, 2014 was when the rubber really started hitting the road. That's when John and his team came in front of City Council, and that's almost, I looked at my engagement letter, it was like within 2 days or right around then when you all said, hey, would you all help me help you out a little bit through the IDB on this project. So they come, the first thing we're negotiating is this development agreement. And you all adopted Resolution 2389, which states that, that our intent was to give them $5 million of incentives, that we would flush that out in an incentive agreement to come later down the pipe. And at the same time, and this is what they really needed to get Bass Pro basically to get on the dotted line, was that we delegated to the IDB the incremental sales tax revenues generated by property owned by Exit One LLC, John's company, any essentially affiliated entity, which is any entity controlled by John or Matt or Ethan, and also, John, please correct me if you feel like I'm misstating anything. I hope you'll stand up and yell foul. And then Plus, I know this has been an issue, the incremental sales tax revenues on the first $10 million annually. And the resolution, specifically says it's an annual expenditure. And so we at that point had delegated to the IDB these incremental sales tax revenues as an incentive to be used under the development agreement for them. But that was not the actual agreement. The agreement was with the IDB, and that's what I was asked primarily to help with. And I can still picture this very clearly because I was on vacation, I remember, at the beach. I flew up here actually for a meeting right in the middle of it because, generally our relationship has been very cordial and professional, but that was 10 days of I had some pretty headbutts with the developer and his counsel at that point in time. And I found a memo that I'd written to the IDB as of like June the 24th, I remember, that talks in detail about how that expenditure, that was $11 million value, the $10 million a year to the developer, that candidly I questioned whether that was a good idea, that was a very generous incentive to them, and basically, and I really wasn't arguing against the $10 million number because I think that water had already gone under the bridge. What I was arguing about at the time was they were wanting to basically put any other property that they might do as affiliated under the agreement. And to be honest, I argued vigorously against that. I said, look, if they have other projects, you guys ought to have a right to sign off on them. And John, with all his charm, was out negotiating me, and they said, and I'm sort of kidding, but at the same time, it's relevant because I reread my memo, and it was pretty, I just don't think this is a good idea. We've already offered them roughly $11 million, because basically $400,000 over 30 years is about $12 million. The present value of it is where I came up with the number of roughly $11 million. And so it was something that was hotly debated and essentially committed to during that period of time. And so that June of 2014 obviously was when we really got going. And so the development agreement, which is the next slide, that's the actual legal agreement. And I remember we were getting that signed on June 30th because we were trying to say that we had what a lot of people call the trigger facility, being the Bass Pro, committed to by the end of the state's fiscal year so we could get our allocation for 2014, if I remember right. John, please again correct me if my memory is incorrect. We actually did get a little bit of money. I think we got, $170,000 or something for that fiscal year because we signed that agreement that day. But I remember also that we were like 5:30 that afternoon getting it signed, running the mayor down and things like that. So we entered into this development agreement. I'm sure Ruth, if she's here today, Ruth, and I think she probably remembers us tracking her down too. And but even that agreement was, and again, I know this again was really hotly debated because I said, guys, we don't know what the $5 million incentives are going to look like. So we still need a separate agreement to flush out what the incentives are going to look like. So that agreement was subject to entering into a subsequent incentive agreement. But this agreement is the agreement that we've agreed to reimburse Exit 1 LLC for its eligible costs, which are going to be very, very substantial, obviously, because they're building a Bass Pro. I mean, that's going to be a big number, and it basically includes the sales tax revenues from the Bass Pro side, and then any other Exit 1 property or affiliated property. In other words, if Matt, Ethan, and John form Exit 2 LLC, which would be a stupid name, but if they form that, they could get the benefit of that if they could show that they control that entity. And that was candidly the main thing I sort of fought with them about. I said, look, you all ought to have a second bite at that apple plus that first $10 million. So we've agreed every year to do that in this development agreement. So then comes along the incentive agreement. So obviously there, we got by June 30th of 2014, and here we are, and John and them said, man, we got to get this incentive agreement done ASAP because it's the whole development agreement. So we immediately dove into that. That was an agreement between the city, the IDB, and Exit 1 LLC, not just the IDB. We signed that on August 14th, and if you all remember, that's the one that I was last year in front of you guys for sort of arguing about that last $1 million. That was the one we said, look, we're going to give you $4 million. We're going to give it to you in this time frame if you meet these requirements. And we did our job, and we dispersed it. And then, as you all recall, there was another $1 million that they had an obligation to loan to the city if we didn't have adequate funds in our budget to do that. And I came and I explained that, and John came and he gave his case, and he's a heck of a lawyer, even though he's not really a lawyer, and again, that you all approved doing that $1 million, and made perfect sense. I understood, because you needed to keep the project going, but that agreement spelled out that's where we dealt with the, and at the same time, we also confirmed that the city would allocate, again, that the revenues from the Bass Pro, from any affiliated property, plus that $10 million once every year when we receive them, that we would reimburse them for their eligible costs. So that theoretically, if we totally reimburse them from their costs, we can stop. But, my guess is that they're gonna, certainly, I know the Bass Pro in Bristol costs about $20 million, and that's public record. So, I can't imagine, unless John knows how to build a Bass Pro a whole lot cheaper than they do in Bristol, that it's going to be a whole lot less than that. So, I don't think we will see this money for, these allocated funds, maybe for the life of the district. And just as a reminder, that makes it a little bit more challenging, because if you had someone else that came in and said, look, I want to build Nordstrom's here, and I'm going to finish on the last slide on what this year looked like, but if you said, okay, we'll give you your sales tax revenues, Nordstrom, from your Nordstrom's in Eastridge, and the reason I use Nordstrom is, it's unlikely they'll come anywhere in Tennessee. They want like $50 million because they think they're so cool. But they are, if they came and we said we only can do that to the extent it exceeds that $10 million. So only if we get above that 412 basically each year do we have available revenues to incentivize somebody else. And every time somebody closes a store, then it negatively affects our revenues if somebody doesn't new open. So like when I drove by the new Walmart, I started slobbering, obviously, because I was so excited about all the sales tax revenues coming from there. But that's the sort of, I'm sure we got that parcel in the revised district. I hope we double checked, John. But that's the sort of new development that is that huge home run for the city. So one thing we collaboratively realized after 2014, though, and all my whining about how this is hard for the city, and certainly, and with Mark's help, and certainly Senator Gardenheimer's help, and Speaker McCormick, the folks, you all have really great representatives from this area. We went and asked for some legislation, because what we realized is that if some of the businesses in the district closed, some of them had several $100,000 of sales tax revenues. So if one of those businesses moved their store, and they had no reason not to, it would wipe out essentially the $300,000 or $400,000 you're going to get this year. One of those closes, it's gone. So we spent a lot of time, and can I promise you it's going to all be perfect? No, but we spent a lot of time thinking through which, and when I say we, it's more the city. A little bit before Mike, well, obviously Mike took over after this, but the city administration, talking to the developer, I think, I'm sure the mayor was consulted some, but the bottom line is that we realized that not disaster, but it could have been a really bad situation. So we went to the legislature and said, guys, give us a one-shot bite at the apple to basically pull out some of these properties out of the border region. And so I candidly was kind of surprised that we didn't get more pushback. And again, I'm not just trying to be nice. It was largely because your legislators are so highly thought of from the Chattanooga area there. And but I think I went to the legislature myself at least 3 or 4 or 5 times on your behalf, not lobbying, just explaining what we were trying to accomplish. And I spent a lot of time with this Department of Revenue getting them comfortable, because if they said no, it never would have passed the legislature, because if Commissioner Roberts or somebody stood up and said, we think this is a bad idea, it would have been giving a lot of people a pass to vote against it. And so we got them comfortable that our district really wouldn't work unless we pulled some of the properties out because of the risk to us of any of them closing. So in earlier this year, we had the law amended yet again, and really just for Eastridge, because Bristol and Kingsport didn't care at all. They're basically greenfield size. They didn't have any base tax revenues to speak of. You all have, and it's all public record now, you have 4 times the base tax revenues that Bristol had. They basically had a hospital, gift shop, and a Hampton Inn. And you guys obviously have half your city in there and your retail. So we got them to allow us this one-shot apple. You guys remember you passed a resolution to exclude certain parcels from the district by June 30th of this year. And so that law is what allowed you to do that. We also were really worried, and Bristol was really worried about this, that basically the state could say, oh, I don't think that was an eligible cost, give me your money back. And we changed the law that they can't do that. They can withhold it from future ones, but they can't come to us and ask us to give money back that they've already given to us. So that was an important change that we got through. We also got them to add some language to the law, because every time we would go to a meeting, we would say, well, we're going to allocate the sales tax revenues for the Bass Pro parcel to help pay costs. Well, they said, you can't do that. That's a felony because you're disclosing personal sales tax revenues. Like, well, how can we implement this law without some latitude to be able to do that? And so we basically got the law changed to give us enough discretion to be able to disclose things in a way that we can administer this law. And so those were the big changes. Obviously, we were thrilled that we got that through. But what we then realized, so along comes May or June, and we go to them, and now they say, well, this is where the parcel issue came up. They had gone to the other Bristol and Kingsport and said, send me your GIS map, show me which parcel's in it. We couldn't show them a GIS map. We sent them some, So we went to our GIS, our Hamilton County, said, hey, match this up as best you can with our map, our pretty little map from 2011. Well, they tried, and when they did, came up with about 1,100 acres, which was 150 more acres than we were supposed to have in the border region. And of course, that was not a good day. And so we were like, okay, what are we going to do about this? And the commissioner, I know he sometimes has not been as supportive as I'm sure that developers in particular would like, but he's look, let's work through this. The intent was to get this down to 950 acres, work through this. And so we went back to GIS, we pulled out additional parcels, Henley, most of them residential, had no chance of development, to get it down to 949.5 acres. And so we think we're at 949.5 acres. We've given the state a GIS map that they can digitally check each year sales tax revenues based by parcel and address. Is it perfect? No, because say you have a strip center with 5 businesses at that address, then the system sometimes loses the multiple of addressees at the same parcel. But generally, it's quite good. And our job, and Diane's job, and she had done a yeoman's work, or yeowoman's, I should say, I guess, to get up to speed on this, is to, every year we're going to have to really double check them to make sure that any closed businesses come out and any new businesses are put on there. And so we think that we now have a really good map. The state has accepted that map, and they've done the calculation this year based upon that map. And so the next page is this year's calculation. And I'll tell you that it's really confusing. John keeps asking me to explain it. I've been teasing with him that I can't explain it. I would not do it mathematically this way, but the way mathematically I do it comes up with the same result in about 20 cents. So but basically what she is doing is she's coming up with the base year taxes, and you can see your base year taxes are very, very big. $5 million of base year sales taxes from there at the 6% rate. That's not at the 7% rate. That's pulling out the 1%. And if you're me, you're saying, well, why didn't you take out the 0.5% for education? She doesn't like doing it that way. She likes taking out the 0.5% below the line and takes out the 1% above the line. Mathematically, I think it comes out the same way. But this is the base year at 6%. Then she calculates she also had food, as you all know, is at 5%. So it's actually there's a slightly lower sales tax rate on food. So that reflects the food and the regular sales tax at 6%. So this year at 6%, our sales tax from the Board region was almost $6 million, $5,964,000. And so that doesn't exclude the food, and then the food was $427,000. That's at 5%. So you add those two together, you see that our total sales tax revenues $6,392,000, which is about, well, you can see the math, obviously, $1,147,000 of growth. So we don't get 100% of the growth, as you know, we talked about, you get 75%. So 75% of that is the $860,000. But as I mentioned, she likes to pull out the 0.5% for education below the line. So basically, she's taking 1/12 of that number off, because 0.5% is 1/12 of 6% to get us down to 789,036.72 as what is being distributed to us. Now, you'll see that little thing below the line. They overpaid us. They forgot to take out the 0.5% last year. They were kind of embarrassed about it, but they really did forget to take out the 0.5%. They paid it for us. We said, hey, we'll make it up next year. And so this is the makeup for them overpaying us $16,000 last year.
Question,
Yes.
is the hotel motel tax, is that calculated into this sales tax in anything?
There is sales tax on hotel services, but there is no, the hotel motel tax itself. If you legally have a hotel motel tax, it's separate from sales tax. It is not affected by this law at all.
Just a, excuse me, point of clarification, when you refer to she in referring to this
Yes.
calculation, it's Amanda McGraw.
Amanda McGraw, who is a really nice lady, does all the calculations for the TDZs, so she was the likely person to get stuck with this project. And so, and she's my new best friend, and along with her boss, David Girgano, who's the deputy commissioner. And so often I'll get calls from the commissioner, the deputy commissioner, and Amanda all at the same time if they're mad at me. If they have good news, that just usually Amanda calls. But we've worked with her now, a year and a half, 2 years to try to sort through this, and she and Diane worked really well together. And I'm not saying that to be nice to Diane. I haven't not met Diane in person, I don't believe, but she and Diane seemed to they had good karma, and it worked well. And so